Nemám všechny rád. Okay, so now we are ready. We lost a few minutes, but we will try to make it on time in spite of the rich content of our session. And I'm glad, and it's my honor and pleasure to introduce the next session and moderate the next session, which is the session on the OpenBIM. And we organized this session as the partner of the conference of the Ministry of Industry and Trade as the Building Smart Czech Republic in cooperation with the Building Smart International and a number of Building Smart chapters who were so glad to make their time and come to the conference. I will just briefly introduce myself. My name is Leoše Svobody. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Czech BIM Council, which is also the Building Smart Czech Republic chapter since 2021. And my focus is on mostly consulting at the edge of BIM and geospatial area. I just started a new project on utilization of BIM data in the National Spatial Data Infrastructure, which is called NIPI in our country, for those who don't know what NSDI is. So I will moderate, and I will first introduce the colleagues. Before I do it, I need to make a short survey. You always like surveys, right? So if you ask 5 engineers, what is BIM? How many responses do you get? 1, 3, or 5? So who thinks we get 1 response? You can just... Well, not many. Who thinks you get 3 responses? Okay, there are more. And 5 responses? All right. You are all wrong, because you get 7 responses, in fact. Yeah? Okay. So, our session is also about the standards, about the common language. We heard common language is BIM. We heard common language is levels, the new European framework. We hear the common language is a classification system, or we hear the common language is data standard. So, there's a lot of confusion, and Building Smart has been trying to make some order over the last 30 years in digitization of the built environment. So I will introduce my colleagues, and I will ask for their profiles. We will go by the order. So I will start with my colleague and the chairman of the Czech BIM Council, Mr. Petr Matyáš. Besides being the chairman of the Czech BIM Council, he founded and he manages his company called DI5 Architects, and he's been developing a tool for utilization of BIM in facility management called BIM Point. I will introduce the next. And next to me, I have Frank Hovorka. Frank Hovorka is the chairman, the president of Building Smart France. And Frank has been active in many roles in the construction industry since the 90s, including his tenure with Vinci in Prague. So we have the luck that we can even speak in Czech with Frank. And the next one is Casey Rutland. He's been the chairman of Building Smart UK and Ireland, which is the chapter covering both countries. Now he's also vice chair of NEMA. NEMA is the new name of the UK BIM Alliance until recently, and so Casey represents all the best what has been happening in the UK in BIM, and many of us has been looking at the UK as the example of how the national strategies could be implemented. The next. Sorry, I will also mention Casey has his company called Digital Green and provides consulting for the asset management, utilizing information management. Then I will introduce Veljko Janjic. Veljko comes from Slovenia. He's been active in the Building Smart chapter, or founding the Building Smart chapter in Slovenia, but also in Croatia, working with Serbia in that space. And besides being active, and also he's member of the International Advisory Committee of Building Smart. And besides that, he's founded and he's managing his company, BEXEL Consulting, providing a tool for BIM management within the whole life cycle. And the last, but our special guest, representing Building Smart International, comes from the Netherlands, Céline Bent. She's been with Building Smart International in the role of Director of Compliance Programs. So that's so that you know, we are all in some positions, roles in Building Smart, and besides that, of course, we are involved directly in a number of areas of BIM implementation, information management implementation. I try to make the session in the way that we have introductions by each of the panelists, speakers. They will not have very short, they will have medium time, and I've asked them to keep within, let's say, 7-8 minutes each. They have short presentations. And as a part of the introductory presentations, we will also have a pre-recorded video by the head of the TC442, Mr. Oyvind Ruud, and he would address the standardization in the SEN or in the work group TC442. So we will run the video after our speakers, and then I hope we will still have some time for panel discussion. We have 3 topics to discuss with our panelists, and of course we would appreciate their questions, comments, concerns via a Slido, or as you may prefer, if you just raise your hand after our introductory presentations, I would be glad to take your questions live. And I will then ask our first speaker, which would be Peter. I need to say we have a combination of large countries. We have France, we have UK, we have a combination of medium or small countries. So we will have different views of how OpenBIM helps the implementation of information management and BIM in the countries or in the practices of business in those of my dear panelists. So Peter, may you start, please, with your presentation.
So thank you, Leoš. Let me just welcome you all on this conference. And for the beginning, I want to tell you something about the CZBIM, which is now home for the Building Smart Czech Republic. How we started, we were founded in 2011, and we have something like 57 collective members now. We organize already more than 660 events. We have our own standardization projects, and we also cooperate with Czech government, and from 2017 we have a government mandate to adopt BIM in public procurement. We had some plan that from 2022 it should be required in public procurement, in public tenders. The standardization is going on. You could see a lot of questions to the panelists during yesterday, which were about this topic. We also introduced in 2018 the commercial data standard by CZBIM, which was quite used. And we prepared also the web page, which you can check and you can use, it's even in the English, which is called Find CDE. And this is page where we wanted to help to the people to choose the right CDE system, to compare the functionality and everything. And because we faced, of course, some problems and difficulties during time of the implementation of BIM, and during these 5 years, there were new topics like new construction law and digitalization of building permits. So, and also our members are mostly the international companies. We decided that it's really time to turn to the open BIM standards, to bring the open BIM standards to the Czech Republic and to be part of the standardization. So from 2022, from March, we are part of the Building Smart community. We have a chapter. Since that time, we have participants in each working group of Building Smart. And what we have done is that we organized a parallel working group in Czech Republic, which are headed by this representative. So we are able to transform or bring all of these open BIM standards to Czech Republic. And we have now also very good communication about the open BIM standard with the Czech Agency for Standardization. And what will be in next session, and Leoš will talk about it, we adopted already the training and certification program of Building Smart. And Leoš also asked me not only talk about the building smart, but to say something what brings OpenBIM standard, what they mean for me as for architect and for software developer. So on field of the software, it's quite clear, because we use IFC, we need open data, we need open API, so it's quite easy. But as an architect, for everyone, the first thing, we need cooperation, we need coordination. But also the other thing, how we will use the data in the future. Of course, today we design building using BIM. BIM gives us better quality, coordination, etc. And also, in history, the cities, they used to be flat. And technology always changed the architecture. So when we invented construction steel and concrete, the cities started to be vertical. When there was electrification, so we changed the public space of the cities, and people started to live differently in their cities. And now we have a data. And data, they are quite common. But truly, us as architects and designers, we didn't change our approach so much. We still be focused just on the physical parameters, and we should maybe consider much more the non-physical parameters. Like is, for example, educational performance, better fun experience, better sleep, because all of us nearly has some smartwatch, so there are information how people sleep in which hotel rooms, which are better or worse. And these data, they will give us feedback to us, to architect, to urban planners, so we will be able to plan much more better cities and to do much better houses. And this is the reason why me as an architect, why we need open data, because this data, they has to be open, there has to be some policy, how to public them, and we should be able to use them. So thank you, and that's all from me.
Thank you, Peter. So that was experience. Thank you. That was experience quite fresh, becoming part of Building Smart last year, and really the first implementation of programs and visions of Building Smart. Now we will continue with Frank, and that will be. I can give you. There's one. There, yeah, okay. And Frank will also add to his introduction all the activities he's been involved with, and he will lead us through the very hot topic, the environmental performance of assets supported by the standards.
Děkuji moc krát, Leoše, tak nebudu mluvit česky, ale já jsem rád. Děkuji za pozvání, jsem rád, že jsem v Česku zpátky a ještě jednou děkuji na ministerstvo a na všechny skupiny, které zařídili ten pořád. Děkuji. All right. It's a long time I didn't spoke Czech, so I'm very happy I could. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So I will try to go through use case, because we have decided that the international level of Building Smart with the European chapters, and the Czech chapter is one of them, to work about how we can assess greenhouse gas assessment. And just to speak about data, we'll tell you that we are not the one trying to live with different standards. I'm sure you know everything about accountancy standards. So this is where they are, because we have the international accountancy standards, we have the sustainability accountancy standards, the reporting, we will have in Europe the new mandatory reporting system, which is called CSRD, made by an institution named EFRAG. Well, all this not to explain you in one slide where we are in accountancy, but to tell you that we are in the world where the accountancy is also struggling with standards and to reporting, because they want to integrate into the financial reporting the double materiality, which is the impact of sustainability in the activities of societies, companies. And why does it concern us? you will say, because that's a problem of finance and accountant, and we don't care. No, we care, because finance is the one who's giving us the loan or investing in the buildings or infrastructures. And if a finance wants to have data, they will invest to get the data. But how can we help them and translate the information and technical information for the green reporting? We have already a system in Europe with the European certification tag, with construction product regulation, environmental product declaration. So how do we work with all these data which are in fragmented databases with different regulation in order to get and calculate the proper greenhouse gas emission of embodied carbon into a material and energy performance? So we have the eco-design. I will not go through all this regulation that you know and that were presented yesterday and better than me by the European officer which were there. We have the environmental product declaration, which is under a standard. We have the life cycle assessment, is how we move from the environmental product declaration into a life cycle assessment. So we move from one standard to another. Nobody knows how to do it with a machine. So we have some software vendors who are working on that. But how is it transparent? How is it reliable? How is it tagged? How is it certified? This is a question mark. And then we have also people working on the two greenhouse gas emissions impact, which is carbon from energy use and the embodied carbon. So we worked with the World Build Council Sustainable Development about the embodied carbon. It's clear that we are starting a path, because nobody knows, at least I think only 15% of the real estate developers and asset managers a year ago were aware about how to calculate carbon impact. And on the top of that, nobody knows the difference between a footprint, between a full national declaration and a life cycle assessment, because it's the same metric. We are talking about greenhouse gas equivalent. But if you're looking about your footprint, you are looking about your impact globally, including the importation. If you look at the national declaration, which is what is discussing today at the COP27, it's only the emission in your country, and you then take in account the import. So it's a huge difference. In France, for example, you are moving from 450 million tons of CO2 by the national declaration to more than 800 million of tons if you look at the footprint. And life cycle assessment is something also different, because you are looking at 50 years of emissions, and you sum up and you divide by 1 year. So really important to have in mind these three metrics. So we have a French product database, because from the 1st of January in France, it's mandatory for all new buildings to have a calculation of life cycle assessment. So we are working with this database, and we are working with software vendors who have integrated the core, which is made by the French scientific system represented by Leoše Svobody, who made the core calculation system for the life cycle assessment. So, if I move to carbon from energy use, we have all the international standards for energy performance, ISO 52000, all the series. We have a standards. We have a set of standards. It's all published. We have 53 European standards to work with. But again, how do we move from product declaration to an overall energy performance of the systems? How do we calculate it? With 53 standards, I think no one in Europe has wrote the 53 standards. So it has to be machine readable, it has to be software in the software. How do we work on that in order for the public officer who are organizing a tender for the private companies to be sure that the information I have as a greenhouse gas emission is according this set of SEN standards or ISO standards? For the moment, it's done by hand. It's not very clear. It's a lot of work. It costs a lot of money. It's a burden instead of being a data that can be used. So if you look at the idea of a building passport or logbook, if you lose all this data, this information, if you put it on a 50 years dynamic approach, well, we have all the information by the standards that we can comply with. The primary energy consumption, indoor environmental quality is standardized. Design embodied carbon, it's standardized also. You can calculate it, you can use your model. You can do the same with a measured energy consumption with energy performance certificate. Well, calculated operational carbon, you can have the standards for it too. So you see that everything in your building passport can be managed if you accept to move from a static vision to a dynamic approach. So this is why I put one page, 50 years. We need to move to dynamic. This is really the key message I would like to share with you today. Stop thinking about static snapshot about how the building is today. Look at dynamic, because it's quite important. And this is the kind of diagram I propose where we move from the products and systems to the building by itself. The building will react according to the climate, if the climate is changing, according to the use. It will have a consumption, it will have an impact on the users, it will cost money. So how do we organize the information? So we have a building logbook about product systems and information about the components. And then we have to move to the dynamic approach with an open platform, connection with several data environment, with industry, with energy use, with EPCs and so on, in order to have a vision, a dynamic vision of our building. So we spoke about ontology just before. I want to remind that ontology was the first time invented by a philosopher, Edmund Husserl, at the beginning of last century. And it's a philosophical approach about ontology. It's supposed to be logical. It talks about products, parts, components, boundaries, and interconnection between parts and the whole system. And it has to manage the uncertainty between the parts, the system, and the way we have a dynamic between. So it's just a matter of how we can invent a dynamic ontology with parts, a whole system, and interaction between components, systems, and the use of a system. So this is where we could go with Building Smart, working with the global vision about common data space, analytics and intelligence, and really have a common data environment about the asset information model, linked to a first use case that could be the one with the greenhouse gas, as I mentioned, that we need to have in the coming years, because this is the demand of our investors. So this is where we are, and we'll stop with the next session if you want to have more information that we will take in beginning of next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. And our next speaker, I've just asked for the presentation, please. You will see. Okay, our next speaker is, as I introduced already, Casey Ratland from the UK.
Okay, thank you, Leosh. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to come and share our experiences. I'm going to attempt to describe to you the importance of standards for good information management. There's been a lot of talk over the last day and yesterday about standards, a lot of talk about sharing, a lot of talk about common data environments. I'm still not sure whether we're at the stage of common data environments or whether people are actually referring to common document repositories. And that's really the step we need to get beyond. So this is the point of this presentation, is to get you to understand the importance of data and for our industry to start valuing data as an asset in itself. Because it's all very well using clever, smart technologies to create documents, but actually what's the data that it's creating and what's the purpose for creating that data? This is me, it's quite accurate. Don't need to run through my roles, but I do hold BIM open mic events, which are no agenda events, alcohol-fueled, general discussion about the truth about the application of BIM. So you don't get the polished marketing versions, you actually get the truth about BIM implementation there. I also lead the Government and Industry Interoperability Group Workstream B, which is the UK government's workstream looking at how we get data to work together for various different purposes. I also sit on the UK Government Construction Leadership Council Digital Network in order to get all the government's horizontal and vertical work streams to understand how digital can enable them to meet their targets. So let's take a look at a particular instance where we have an organisation that has the need to own and operate assets. Now, we'll skip to individual asset owners after this, but it's important to know where the emphasis is coming from. And if we do have a large organisation that has a series of departments, and each of those departments need to own or operate assets or projects that sit within them, and each one of those has its own set of assets and operations and things, and then each one of those has their own. If we don't have standardised data structures that we use for all of those, every single exchange of information, of data, needs its own language. And people do that. This is the state of our industry right now. Lots of people are creating their own data structures. Lots of people are creating their own silos. They're locking themselves away, not knowing the work of Building Smart that exists, that's globally been created on consensus over 25 years. So they don't know about that. So we need to do much more work in gaining exposure in the industry. So we're trying to make that, reduce the number of data languages that people need to learn. And the current process is that with all these different silos and the different data languages, it introduces inefficiencies at a national scale. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Translation of those data things could be helpful, and we have a lot of people offering services to translate data from legacy data to new data to other data systems, connect things. But really, that's just adding to the complexity of an ongoing maintenance of that data. And that's something, again, we don't necessarily need. And then if you imagine that each one of those smaller projects has other teams and other contributors throughout a supply chain also trying to contribute information. At that level, the securing of that data is just on a one-to-one. Then securing that data multiplied across that project, up through into the department and across departments, we soon end up in quite a mess. And that's essentially what we're aiming to do with Building Smart, is to reduce all of that, or get rid of it all completely, by creating and using a data language to describe assets in the built environment. I heard mentioned yesterday IFC quite a number of times. People referred to it as an archiving format a lot. That kind of annoys me. Actually, it's quite an agile schema to describe things for the life cycle of any asset. And that's the value of it. So that it's not the value of creating something that can just be shared once and enable you to create a three-dimensional model that can be shared, but it's the data associated to the geometry that is the important part. Additionally, when we talk about digital twins, again, structured data is an absolute perfect foundation for a digital twin. If we have to translate, clean, cleanse, and all that data that data scientists are used to doing, if they don't have to do that because they've got reliable, trustworthy, checked data to use, that is a good foundation for starting to use data across departments, across nations, to better perform in the built environment. So the concept of interoperability then is that data should ideally exist outside of the software that generated it. And that doesn't mean to say there isn't a space for proprietary formats, because there is. It's very useful in a development, in a design and construction phases. But actually, if that data is treated as an asset reliably and it sits outside, but is still secure, still accessible to other platforms, suddenly it opens up the world of opportunities. You can connect with other different pieces of software. Whether you're just viewing the data for a particular purpose or a particular task that you need to do, or whether you're adding to that data set, whether you've got a new system you want to add, an HR system, a finance system, an operational system, we can add other software to that. And it's all reading the same structure of data. There's no translation required. It's all consistently checked and ready to use. We can also use that same data language, the IFC, as a way to connect or translate legacy schemas. As we mentioned, lots of people are creating their own data structures. They have legacy data systems. They've been using them for years and years. They rely on them on a daily basis to own and operate. What we can do with this is to translate to IFC once And then that tool will translate, ultimately that legacy data will fall away. So you end up using the standardized, globally accepted way of describing things in the built environment. And that's repeated. We can use dashboards to understand insights across various different systems, add more software, add more dashboards, introduce other legacy systems from other organizations. And that's really the power and the efficiencies of using an open data schema alongside standards to generate that data, to enable all of these purposes. We've seen a lot of really exciting, really positive case studies over the past couple of days, and a lot of them can be described as being sitting within ISO 19650 process, the process that governs what BIM is and how that should be defined, how it should be delivered. The first part of the ISO 19650 suite is identifying the purpose for the information and the information requirements. That's vital and essential. It sets the scene for the entire program. One thing that I would say that is often controversial is that everyone sees the BIM process as being a tool for collaboration. It is, it absolutely is. It enables people to work together. But if you are starting on your journey, take a selfish route. Understand where you sit within the BIM process. Understand the value you, individually, as a person, as a company, the benefit that you get from it, and everything from there will become a lot easier. When you end up in a project team with multiple people doing the same, everything sits together nicely. So that's my perhaps provocative point. But yeah, I hope you all jump on board.
Thanks so much, Casey. Thank you. Thank you, and I will already introduce our next speaker is Veljko Janjic from Slovenia.
So, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
so, thank you, Leosh. It's really a great pleasure to be here again in Prague. It's an amazing city and amazing people. Thank you, Casey, also for excellent points. So you helped me a lot. So I don't need to elaborate the importance of the data, open data, and so on. So I will start with just two questions. So who is here coming from, let's say, developer company or real estate developer and so on? Please raise your hands. Okay. Who is coming? Who is a general contractor, mid-size or large one? In total, just 4. And we are talking about construction industry, right? So who can lose or gain the most? And they are not here. Why? I'm a board member of Construction Room Building Smart International, and we are trying to change this. Because, you know, people, we believe, oh, they are not interested, they are laggards, they are not motivated. The truth is they don't see the benefits for themselves at the moment. We as humans are very smart. So are we all have mobiles with us? Is it mandatory by law? Huh? No? And we all have it because we see true benefits. Today, 95% of all contractors, all this BIM stuff, see as a way how we control them. And they don't see the cost benefits, time benefits, quality benefits, scope benefits. And that's where we are today. And we should change this in order to have them on board. Otherwise, they will choose the simple solution, you know, cheapest BIM consultant, cheapest BIM solution, and do this as a side, because that's not going to be the heart of their business. So just to move to the situation in the industry. So although we believe that Tesla cars or sending rover to Mars is extremely difficult, it is, maybe certain tasks are, but in terms of project management, every average construction project, so residential complex, has more challenges than sending rover to Mars. In terms of coordination, safety, task management, and so on. And that's true. And that's why it's so difficult. And of course, I really like, he knows that what Jan is doing, for example, in Estonia, or what the guys in Finland are doing, so amazing job. But they are focusing on still just the model and the properties. And when we jump into construction, it's really very difficult. And because of that, we fail. And this is situation today in the best case. So I call this BIM level 0 for construction management. So we don't have a single source of truth. So we have a BIM model, and the key value of the BIM model, what is this? CD or authoring tools or something else? I will tell you very easy. The answer is clear. These are authoring tools. Of course, if they're OpenBIM based. Because they produce the data. They produce a huge amount of data, semantics, geometry, and we can reuse this later. So we are talking about data management. I would like to add to some what Casey maybe haven't mentioned. The key problem is who can generate the data. And if we, in theory, can build a brilliant ecosystem, but we need to manually create construction schedule in Primavera, estimate in Excel, HR in SAP, or in any other tools, or logistics in, I don't know, Excel. Theoretically, that's possible, but are we going to do that? Obviously not, because it's like I'm telling you that from Adriatic Sea I can swim to New York. Theoretically, it's possible. Am I going to do that? Never. And so that's why we don't have a single source of truth. So we have estimate 6 months ago, schedule 3 months ago, progress months ago, logistic 8 months ago. And when we have a claim, we have a total chaos. We are lost. And then design is changed, which is not usual, it's always. And we cannot cope with the changes. So the only solution for that is to have something like this. Maybe not in a single tool, maybe in several tools, but to have a BIM-centric system, which can help us and produce 80–90% of the data based on IFC and BCF and BSDD and other open standards. That means that it's possible when we update the design, automatically have a new construction schedule, or have a new procurement plan, or have a new updated cost estimate, or have a variation for the claim, or have a safety check, or environmental analysis. So if we do not have tools like, or systems like this, we will not succeed. And we will not have lot of general contractors and developers here, because they are focused just on two things: money and time, because that's, and of course, quality as well. And that's why World Economic Forum, when they put all this cool stuff about, you know, 3D printing, laser scanning, drones, and so on, they put integrated BIM as this, something which will have the biggest impact on our industry. And those guys are not construction industry, they are business guys. So World Economic Forum recognized this as the thing. And so I will now just like to show one video, short, if you can run at the end. So just to, can you start the video, please? So just to see what is possible from 80–90% of the data here is coming directly from pure IFC and BCF, BSDD. So open standards. And everything else is automatically generated. So literally some of those simulations and analysis can be initially developed in 5 to 10 minutes. And that's the idea. So the idea is to have this automated and streamlined process. If you have the opposite, so this is without scheduling Primavera or without Excel spreadsheets. So the idea is to do the same stuff in construction management stage as we do in design stage, because again, our authoring tools are producing huge amount of data. On that football stadium, that's for next World Cup, there are 80 million properties, property values automatically generated from IFC. And we can, good news is, use that data for our analytics. So that's And these are some sample dashboards. So the idea is also what was discussed yesterday, that whenever you are dealing with the people, you need to simplify end results. So the tools, technologies must be complex, but the user interface and it must be very easy and self-explanatory. So how we do that testing, we usually ask physicians or let's say the guys who are not related to construction industry at all, and test if they can understand this. And if they can, then we know we are on the right track. And that's what we should do in industry as well, because otherwise, you know, we cannot have only rocket scientists and PhD guys who can work on construction projects. So that's more or less what I wanted to say. So looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you, Veljko, for the proof, right? If people say something is not possible with OpenBIM, you just showed everything is possible. Thank you for that. And our last introduction, last speaker in this session would be Céline. I introduced Céline already. Céline comes as a new compliance director of Building Smart International, responsible for a project for the software certification and also the individual professional certification. So Céline will tell us a little bit about her views and her takes and her first period working with the Building Smart. Céline?
Thanks. Can you hear me? I did spend the major part of my career so far at a construction company. Not anymore, so I couldn't raise my hand. I worked at one of Europe's largest construction companies called BAM, with the headquarters in the Netherlands. And I was the head of sustainability there. Sustainability is a great passion of mine. And BAM was quite ahead of its time in the field of corporate sustainability. So it published its first sustainability report in 2008. And as part of that, we created a calculation method for CO2 emissions for the industry in the Netherlands, because it didn't exist at the time. And later this methodology was adopted by a public procurement instrument called the CO2 Performance Ladder. And this is an instrument that companies can use to improve their CO2 performance. And on the basis of that, they get a certificate on this ladder, on the different levels on the ladder. And this can help them get an award advantage in public tendering. And in the beginning, when it was launched, not many companies adopted it, only the larger ones. They achieved certificates on a lower level of this ladder. But quite soon thereafter, when more municipalities and governmental bodies adopted this instrument, all companies basically achieved a high level on this ladder. So there was actually no competitive advantage to gain from it anymore. And this was really the whole range from really small enterprises to the larger ones. So in a way, this instrument has become redundant. But that's a great thing, because it, of course, created a huge shift in the Netherlands. Many companies, or all the companies, they measure their CO2 performance, and they are improving it. And because of that, you see that other neighboring companies and countries are adopting the same, or trying to adopt the same instrument. So it can radiate outside of the Netherlands as well. There you can see that. So it's time for the next step in the Netherlands. And now for a focus on the performance of buildings, for example. And I also made a step. I moved from BAM to BIM. And I joined Building Smart International. As you all might know, Building Smart International is a community, a global community, including the gentlemen right here on the stage, that together work on the development of open standards and solution. And Building Smart was also quite ahead of its time. It was founded in 1994. And it published IFC. I don't think I need to explain what that is to you. IFC is an international standard and a semantics for OpenBIM, and governments around the world, or governmental bodies around the world, have issued mandates for the use of it. And all the dots on this world map here represent an IFC mandate. And as you can see, the epicenter seems to be in Europe. And from what I can judge right now, most of the front runners in the field of BIM are also situated in Europe. And it would be great if the European Union, aside from maybe using a stick by issuing an IFC mandate, would use the carrot approach. For example, by making the use of IFC part of an awarding system for public tendering, or adopting the same principles for education and training and certification for the use of OpenBIM. Building Smart, we have a program for this called Professional Certification. You will hear more about that later. And by doing so, hopefully, IFC will become redundant as well in the future, or the promotion of IFC. And just like that, no architect is using hand drawings anymore, except for my favorite architect, I think. But everybody uses CAD, and I really hope the same thing will happen for IFC and open standards and solutions. And please don't forget that this is such a relevant tool, OpenBIM, for sustainability, by improving efficiency in the industry. Like Frank showed you, it is crucial for doing very accurate reporting on carbon and the circular economy, and it makes renovation and reusability more feasible. So I really hope that Europe can set the example for the rest of the world in OpenBIM, and with that, in sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Céline. I have a couple of questions coming through Slido already, but as we plan to have the discussion and the panel and more questions and answers afterwards, I will ask our colleagues now to run the video by the SEN TC442 by the head of the unit, Mr. Oyvind Ruth, and this would give us some context of the OpenBIM with the overall international standards framework from the European perspective. SEN is working closely with ISO and cooperate closely on standards also related to the built environment, including the BIM itself as represented by TC442. So we are just now probably trying to run the video.
Hello, my name is Oyvind Ruth. I'm chair of SEN TC442, Building Information Modeling. I will give you a short presentation today about SEN TC442 and how that can support the transition of the digital transition in the construction sector in Europe. I'm sorry that I can't join you in Prague today. We have plenary meeting in SEN TC442 at the same time in Helsinki. So that's the reason for this video. I hope it works well. Short on myself, why I'm here. My name is Oyvind Ruth. My day job is with the Norwegian Building Authority. I'm chairperson in CEN TC 442, Building Information Modeling. I'm also chair in the ISO TC 59 AC13, which is the ISO committee for BIM. I'm also chair the technical board for construction standards Norway. My background is civil engineer from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. I have been project manager for the first generation system for digital building permit in Norway from 2000 to 2012. At the moment, we are on the second generation in Norway. I have been active in BIM standardization since 2003. Vice chair in Building Smart International from 2009 and 2013, and I have been board member of Building Smart Norway from 2004 to this year. So yeah, quite a bit. I will start a little bit with the scope of CEN TC 442, because there's a lot of misunderstanding what this acronym BIM actually is. BIM can be a 3D model, that is a geometric data stored in a model. But the main purpose with, or the best thing with BIM is the eye information. That is the strength of the BIM, is this eye, that we can put information on the different elements in the geometric model, and then we can do a lot of more stuff than we can just do with a simple 3D model. So the scope of 442 is quite wide. We take care of the whole life cycle information of the built environment. And we will develop a structured set of standard specification report which specify methodologies to define, describe, exchange, monitor, record, and securely handle asset data, semantics, and processes with links to geospatial and other external data. So that means that we cover it all, not only the data itself, but the processes around it. Processes that is needed to have good quality data. We also have linked to other technologies as Internet of Things, robotics, and so on. So we have a connection with others. We don't do it all. Here's a short slide of the structure of CEN TC 442, just for your information. I will just highlight a little bit about the Working Group 7, the horizontal role. This is a group that coordinates across the different TCs within CEN. CEN have many product TCs and application TCs, as for example the Eurocodes. All of these committees have demand from the industry that they should support digitalization and BIM. And CEN TC 442 deliver the standards they need, so we give them the methodology, but they have to provide the content. We have also some technical committees here, or working groups. We have the exchange information, that is the core, hardcore technical committee. And then we have a working group working with the processes, information management, and so on. We have another one who make standards for data templates and data dictionary, how we can build up a common digital language for construction. Not the language itself, but the technology that enable this. And we have one for infrastructure, to find how infrastructure fits in this in the best way. We have one with competence, that we have a set when you go to contracting and so on. If you ask for some, for example, a competence you need in your project, and this is, for example, a BIM coordinator, it should be the same. You have whatever, where in the market you find them. They don't make the details, they don't do the certification, but they will build up some kind of, see if there is possible to build up a framework in Europe. And the last one, the newest one, is the digital twins. And what they want to do is to look what is digital twins in the context of construction or the built environment. Digital twins is a buzzword that is used everywhere today, so it's important that we are clear what we mean when we talk about digital twins in the construction sector. Okay, this slide again shows a little bit how we collaborate, who we are collaborating with. As I told you before, we have the CEN and CENELEC. We also try to follow as best I can with the EU Commission and the initiative from there. That's one of the reasons I'm here today. Another EU BIM initiative as the EU BIM task group and so on. And then we collaborate with the AC13. Standards Norway have the secretariat in both CEN and ISO. That's actually a good thing we have learned when we come to practical issues. And across IEC, I will special note about that they call strong and trustful collaboration. We have a Building Smart International, who are the place and the owner for the core model standard IFC, and where it's all started, actually. We also collaborate with ISO. ISO have a document called Vienna Agreement, regulate how these two organizations shall collaborate. The interesting thing is that this Vienna Agreement says that ISO should take the lead, most of the work, but ISO can accept that CEN take the lead. And at the moment, we see that more and more project is accepted with CEN lead. That tells us that the main development of BIM standardization worldwide now is happening actually within CEN at the moment. Yes. This is just to tell you that how we support this new important strategies from the EU Commission about the new Green Deal and so on, and the twin strategy about digitalization. So what we're saying here is that CEN TC4 developed the standards enabling implementation of these strategies. That is important to remember. It's not needed to start from scratch. We have understood that it is complicated to have overview of all the standards delivered by CEN TC442, what they can be used for, and so on. So we have made what we call a mapping of CEN TC442 standards. The idea is to publish this on the internet and update it twice a year. It's not yet published on the internet, but it will be. At the moment, you can have the last update if you contact the TC secretary. I have the address on the slide here. But the idea here is that you can see what kind of standard, the grouping of the standard and so on. This is a map. I don't show you the details here, but that shows an overview all the standards and documents is out there in 442. And there is an Excel spreadsheet that we can provide to you that explain all these standards and the connection between them. So what is the takeaway from this presentation? Well, building information modeling is about transforming data to information, enabling digitalization of the construction industry value chain in the life cycle of the built assets. Data must be structured and managed to become useful information that can be shared and support decision in the whole life cycle of an asset. In many ways, TC442 is only the facilitator. The TC442 standardized methods how data can be exchanged and information managed digitally. Other organizations must define their own properties, processes and elements using TC442 methods. Machine-readable properties definition should be shared digitally across a market. This can be done with a data dictionary based on the 442 standards. CEN TC442 standards enable digitalization of the construction sector and support EU initiative as digital building logbook, digital building permit, construction product passport, and digitalization of the construction ecosystems value chains all over. So this is all from me today. I hope you sit back with an understanding that there is a lot of useful tools within CEN TC442. There's a lot of experts there that also is useful. I know many of them is here today and also will attend a lot of this EU-based project. So thank you for the attention, and please don't hesitate to contact the Secretariat if you have more questions. Thank you.
Well, Owen couldn't hear us and see us, but I'm sure someone would tell him that he had a success with his presentation, and we would now switch. As we have about 20 minutes left, we will switch to our discussion. We will switch to our panel, and we had some pre-prepared questions, like where we see the benefits, where we see the problems. And I first would like to start with the questions we received from the audience, and I would ask our colleagues to maybe sort them first by the most recent one, because we have now showing questions from the other or the previous session. So if we can just switch, jestli to můžeme seřadit podle posledních. Okay, I would pick up the one which has the most vote. There's a couple of more below those, but I would like to start and ask all of you just to think and just give us your insight on this last listed here, which has the most votes, and which is very open question. If you believe that one day software companies would move to use IFC directly. And the Casey is showing, he's taking his microphone, so he would like to start for sure. Casey, please.
Yes. Can you hear me now? Yeah. It's already happening. There are a lot of software developers now building on the foundations of IFC to create free or low-cost tools that either create IFC, modify, edit, store, exploit IFC datasets. You only need to look at Blender BIM as an example of a community-driven piece of software that enables that. So there are already engineering companies, construction companies. One example in the UK is Hinkley Point C, which is a new nuclear reactor, who are now using Blender BIM to manage the coordination, the reinforcement of the concrete. So there are tools already out there that are free or low cost, and that's the important thing, that are natively using IFC as an enabler to manage a huge amount of both geometry and data on their projects. So absolutely is happening to a point where it's becoming a bit of a threat to the more traditional, larger software companies.
So that was a very clear response. Anyone else? Veljko?
Just from technical perspective, of course, he mentioned what Dion is doing with Blender BIM. It's an excellent example. Another one is IFC.js and Antonio and others. So there are plenty of initiatives. But I want to say from software developer perspective that there are certain things inside the system due to some inefficiency of, let's say, storage of IFC has to be also internally used in some other technologies and standards, but the key point is that inputs and outputs must be fully open. So that's maybe why we are not going to have in the future only everything based internally on IFC, but if you consider tools and technologies as black boxes, inputs and outputs should be always OpenBIM and IFC.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to address this one? So if Peter would, okay.
Maybe because we are also software developers and we are working with IFC, and now we are having some or preparing some IFC generator, so they will be able to modify it directly. But as Veljko said, there will be always software and innovations which will have to use their own native standards, and then it's necessary to be very strict with their ability to convert it to the IFC, because this is now what doesn't work so well, because you have a software which doesn't work properly with IFC, which I see as a trouble, bigger trouble than native standard. And also we are dealing on Hinkley Point and other large project that you have standards and formats which are coming from the industry. You have to use them, you have to coordinate them with IFC, so you will always be facing to have different formats, different standards, so then it's just really to have a good translation between them.
Just quickly add to a point Veljko made. The IFC.js project I think it is that one, it might be one of the others, now enables people to edit, modify and create IFC data in a web browser. So that's the point we're getting to now, where you don't even need a piece of software. It's just, you just log into the web browser and you start editing an IFC once you've pointed the browser at it. So it's increasing in its maturity, in its availability, applicability, the more we share it. Can I just ask the audience one question? Can I ask anyone who is either contributing to Building Smart or using Building Smart resources, just to raise their hand? Yeah, so there's a significant number of people in the room already promoting open data or using open data within their working processes, and I think just go and talk to any of us, because most of us are volunteers. I volunteer that I do this for free because I see it as the right thing to do. So a lot of us, the Building Smart community, is made up of a huge number of volunteers. The standards can be a bit overwhelming. A lot of those are created by practitioners giving their time for free just to try and solve these things and make it easier for everybody else. So well done to them.
Thank you. Thank you, Casey. We will switch to another question. I ask Frank to respond that one from Stefan from Romania. Thank you, Stefan, for the question.
Yes, indeed. There was 15 years of work on life cycle assessment standardization, so all the standards are there. You will not quote all the numbers of SEN standards, but it's there. And the question for us is that you have several software tools that can work for you a life cycle analysis in terms of greenhouse gas emission based on information declared by the industry. And the question is not the software, the question is not the IFC are there. The question is, I use also an added tool to translate the semantics from my common data environment from a building with all the components to connect with an external database, which is with another language, because this is another language that was decided by the European Product Declaration Database, eco-platform, so we have to live with for the moment. So it's like it is, so we need a tool to connect both and to secure the information, because we need reliability on the information, because if I give the process I showed you to give an information about greenhouse gas emission of a building, I need to give it to my investor, which will give it to its bank, in order to enforce the green asset ratio. And this has to be controlled by auditors. So what will ask the auditors? Is your information reliable? Where does it come from? And we need to track information from the product that came from the industry maker, that we have inputted into a software which have calculated the life cycle assessment, which is according the European norms, and then it can be reliable. So you see, it doesn't mean that it's perfect, because inside calculation, the accuracy today of a life cycle assessment in greenhouse gas is plus minus 50%, because there is a lot of hypotheses and information that is missing, but at least we start. The problem is not if it's perfect in terms of accuracy. The problem for the auditors is reliability and where the data is coming from. So we have to add another layer, which is the metadata of tracking the information and maintain the tracking record.
Thank you, Frank. Does it help, Stefan? Yeah, thank you, thank you. And I will ask Céline, because we have some more generic question, how we save the planet. And Céline, after her experience with BEM, can address that one, right?
I think so.
Please.
So information about sustainability should be in BIM, no doubts. Will it help us to save the planet? No. It will help us, but it won't save the planet. Just for your information, if we reduce the global cement production by only a quarter, that has the same effect as banning all air traffic worldwide. There is really a lot to do. We have to move away from cement, we have to move away from steel, we have to consume less, we have to live in smaller buildings. We have to reduce our energy consumption. we just have to do everything, and OpenBIM contributes to that, but it's just one of the many things that we need to do.
Thank you, Céline, for a view, and Frank would like to add to that.
Just to summarize from the real estate developer point of view, we don't care if it will help the planet or not, but we care if it can get a loan with a lower interest rate. And this is why we need to have this information back to the banks, because the banks have to report the green asset ratio from 2025. So if you wish to have a bank loan for your investment, think about giving you the right data and sustainability. Sorry to be very cynical.
Well, if that really helps, I would like to use that right now, because I don't get a mortgage for my house.
Thanks for that. We have one related question is regarding the integration with BIM, with the levels, which is the new European framework for sustainability. As a matter of fact, I asked that question myself yesterday in the session of the EC, and the response was to attend the special session on levels, which is organized by Ecoris, I believe, and I don't know if Michael is here still from Ecoris. Michael is there, and Michael was actually showing how you can. No, it was not level, sorry, it was digital building logbook and high-level construction form. But Michael, I don't know if you can, it's somewhere available publicly, right, on the, so that people can sign up for the session on levels, right? That's publicly available information, right? Publicly available event, yeah? Okay, so if you look at European framework levels, given the level, the last S is in brackets, yeah, level, as it is written here. So if you put this into your browser, you will find the EU page on the levels, and I believe there's the event on levels. I believe it's on December the 3rd, or yeah, am I wrong, or am I right?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
And I worked at the beginning of levels, and what is important for you, it's not fully BIM integrated, but the process is in accordance with the BIM, because the levels is based on data collection and data accuracy. So inside of levels, you have a level 0, where you have a level of information which is not reliable, trust, checked. And then you go with more data, more details, and the third level you have checked, reliable data, organized, that can be shared. So levels is really based on a process of data connection.
Very well, thank you. It would be good if it utilizes the information management standards and concept, because it's all about information, and we're talking about information requirements here, so we would be looking forward to the event. We got quite into sustainability area and some general discussion. There was one question, if you may, and I believe we responded all of these, but I would like to go a little bit lower. If you can list down, there was a question regarding the Building Smart Data Dictionary from Josef. Jestli mi to můžete jenom posunout dolů kousek, jo? Třeba o jednu obrazovku. Please, before, yeah, please, Veljko. So, yeah, there was one for you. Okay, Veljko, you can take that one. Yeah, the facility management. You were not probably showing, because you were showing the delivery phase of the, okay, please, okay. If you can complete that.
Okay, so just, so the thing is, in all stages, we have to think about the automation and use intelligence as much as possible. So I just give you, and very important is to differentiate common data environment and common document environment. So today, unfortunately, we only consider as a two separate systems documents, and have on the left-hand side the BIM model. And that's everything we have. They are even not connected, which is not common data environment, or a level 0 of it. So just, what is the idea of automation? So just an example, if I'm putting one chiller in my model, I can have a knowledge base which will automatically attach to that chiller user manual, drawing specification, can automatically say, okay, there are 3 things you have to do: weekly inspection, monthly inspection, annual inspection, and you automatically create 3 maintenance plans for that chiller. And if you have the system like that, then you, as a designer, literally create automatically maintenance plans and significant part of the documents which are necessary for maintenance stage. And this then you have a sustainable system. If you have to do that manually and don't connect this or don't have ability to check if the proper documents are attached to the certain elements in the BIM model, you are literally, on average project, have between 20 and 30% of mandatory documents missing. That's today's statistics. Another, just for life cycle, one thing which is also fair to say, so we know that life cycle is, of course, then you spend much more money than in construction stage. But also, that's true, and that's especially today with energy analysis and sustainability, it's extremely important. But also we have to be honest and say that construction phase is the most cash-intensive, most difficult, most risk-prone stage. So we should respect both.
Thank you, Veljko. And given we have less than 5 minutes left, just briefly, can we address Josef's question, the last one listed, about the status of data building smart data dictionary and the adoption of ETIM? Is Casey, or I can just say, but maybe because of the time, or Casey, can you?
Well, I can't give a definitive answer, but what I will say is that the Building Smart Data Dictionary is there to enable regionalization of properties for a particular project or state or country or whatever. So the Building Smart Data Dictionary is much more flexible than it used to be, in that if there are regional requirements, you can create your own part of the data dictionary that can then be applied to a project. So I don't know what whereabouts Joseph is from, and when he says we will adopt ETIM, but it can be right now.
I believe ETIM is part of Building Smart Data Dictionary. It's one of the classifications available in Building Smart Data Dictionary already, besides others, besides like the CCI, which was mentioned here. But of course, ETIM is adopted by the industry, by the manufacturers, by the product manufacturers. It's worldwide ETIM classification system, and no one is going to change that. It will just stay there forever. Like GS1 is the worldwide recognized and adopted classification system in the area of manufacturing and products. So we just need to understand there will not be a single classification system. If someone thinks that it's an illusion, okay, there will be many classification systems. There will be many different data standards. The way is how to work with them is through data dictionaries. This is an example which is open, which is provided as a service, publicly available service. It's called Building Smart Data Dictionary. You can find it very easily on the Building Smart pages. It has user access, a user interface for people to list through. If you type door, you get about 200 parameters which are showed from the different classification, from the different data standards. So you can compare and they can be interconnected. And it's also available through API. Through API, there is a number of connectors provided by software vendors. So I'm sure there's an API connected to BSDD for Revit. There's an API even for Google, it's not Google any longer, Trimble, SketchUp, right? I just saw an example how Google SketchUp can classify the elements within the 3D model through Building Smart Dictionary online, and you can classify the whole built asset, the construction building, whatever, through Building Smart Dictionary. So to make it easy, if you go to the recording from the Building Smart International Conference 2 weeks ago in Montreal, which will be shortly available publicly, or it's already available publicly, you will for sure find the latest update or Building Smart Data Dictionary with all the details and the explanation. So we will skip that one, or we answer that one. Utilization of ETIM in Czech Republic, I don't know if that was the question, but we can discuss it afterwards. What else? That one, I don't understand the question, why we do not see the benefits of BIM. Didn't we show them here in the session, or you don't see them in your projects, or in general, are they not well communicated? Catch me after the session, please, and tell me, because we are just on the time. And we discussed those. And if we can move back, there was one coming just a few minutes ago. If you can scroll back again to the most recent ones. Yep. The Building Smart Evaluate Financial Effort.
I can comment a little bit.
Please, Casey.
it's something that I've been recognising as chair of the UK and Ireland chapter, is that the work that Building Smart have done on the technical standards is absolutely incredible. I'm in awe of it. Every time I'm surrounded by the people at an event, there's an incredible amount of work that's being done for free to generate those standards. But there is still work to do on how we communicate the value of those to every person in industry. But not only that, outside of what we feel is our industry, because the world of prop tech, creating apps and developers services about the built environment, could really benefit from this standardized, structured data set that we're all going to be producing. So there's communication with different audiences about the value of the standards and what the standards can do for not only what we see as our industry, but other follow-on services throughout the life cycle of the built and natural environment.
Thank you, Casey. Let's do one last sentence or speech by each one. If I may start with Peter to conclude the session, just please briefly, because we are just at 12:30, but they took us a few minutes with the photos, right? So let's do it in 5 minutes, if I may, please. 1 minute each.
Truly, I now just don't know what to say. It was quite interesting, and for me was interesting that it was very much about the life cycle analysis, about saving planets, which I didn't expect. And maybe to this point, we are talking about the BIM and future and data. Maybe it would be also interesting to think how we can gain today's data about the building. Because there is a lot of historical data about the consumption, about everything, and we don't collect them. Even if we talk to the developer about some office building which is existing, which is working, which has LEED certificates, so of course these data are private and nobody is able to analyze what is working properly and what's not. So maybe this would be my last question.
Thank you, Céline, please.
Yeah, triggered by actually that final question about what are the benefits of BIM and what Casey just said. And this panel discussion, everybody still trying to explain the benefit of OpenBIM and how it works. I think there's still a lot of work to do in terms of repeating the message, explaining well, improving our language, which can be extremely technical and a little bit boring. So I think there is still a lot of work to do, and hopefully that will help in improving the adoption rate of OpenBIM, because it is really important.
Thank you. Céline, welcome, please.
So, as Céline mentioned, focus on tangible, easy communicated benefits, and focus on the purposes, what Casey usually said from ISO, or focus on use cases. Otherwise, we will have a challenge. The truth is, we don't need BIM for the sake of BIM. We don't need digitalization for the sake of digitalization. And if we do not fully, in an easy way, communicate clear, obvious benefits, but needs to be, for example, even if you say, okay, use a BIM tool, but there are no guys who can use that BIM tool, still it's not benefit. So we need to offer solution with clear benefits. And if we do that, adoption rate will skyrocket. If we are, as Céline mentioned, focused just on technical things, we will struggle and have the adoption much slower.
Thank you, Veljko. Casey, please.
Yeah, so use the standards. Don't take the assumption that they don't quite work for you, so you'll create your own one, because then we have more to deal with. Use the open standards, understand your purposes, whether that's to deal with United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, delivering on a project, or just going home on time. Leverage your position in the BIM process to achieve those things, and then make the value from it. The one thing I would say is that, yes, we're talking about some fairly technical things here in a technical language. I can't read HTML, but I can use a website. And we need to get our industry to the point where not everyone needs to read IFC, but they can use the data there that's associated with it through various different apps and services.
Thank you. Frank, please.
Yes, I will insist on the life cycle assessment and the life cycle cost, because I started to study it 30 years ago, 35 almost. We already spoke about global cost and life cycle cost, and we lost the path because nobody was in capacity to have information and to manage the complexity and the uncertainty of a life cycle cost on a 50 years standardized lifespan of a building, for example. So if you are a producer and you want to sell me a chiller, how can I buy a chiller with the information that this chiller will run for 20 years instead of 15, with an extended guarantee, with less maintenance, with less impact? So I need the information behind from industry maker, from the designer, from the installers. It's quite complex if I really want to pay for a service. So for the moment, I can't have the information. So as a real estate developers, and we think it's everywhere in the world, we buy the cheapest, because nobody can prove properly there is an advantage for the life cycle, for the higher lifespan, or for a lower cost of maintenance, or so on and so on. So we have an open door thanks to the work done by Building Smart and the OpenBIM to have access easily, as you said, to a lot of complex information that can be managed together in order to go for life cycle assessment, life cycle cost, and management of the how we choose to buy something in the infrastructure or in the buildings, and how we are working on recyclability, obsolescence, lifespan. This is really something we can go further. And it's really exciting because we will optimize and we will start a new period of optimization of how we build the infrastructures and how we build the buildings. And it's clearly very important because you can define the optimum lifespan of your components. And it's something also that we can learn from other industries that are working on the PLM, on the product lifecycle management. We can have the advantage that they already did it since 20 years, and we can implement it fast in the industry, because I don't agree with what was said yesterday that we are behind everyone in terms of productivity. It's not true, because a lot of the productivity was taken by the prefabrication. If you look at the windows makers, the facade makers, it's really a high-level industrialization, but what we are lacking is the knowledge, the collection of data, and the integration on-site, as Veljko said. Because this is really the bottleneck where we lose a lot of information and we lose a lot of quality, and we don't transfer the information back for the owners during the lifespan. So we are at a very exciting moment where we can really use the global cost approach, thanks also to the greenhouse gas, because I spoke about greenhouse gas, but in a life cycle assessment, if you shift CO2 in euros, you have your global cost.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks to everyone for their views. I just would like to conclude briefly. That's what I like about Building Smart. We come from very different angles. We come from different countries. Building Smart is present in most of the European countries. Anna Moreno from Italy, Birgitta from Switzerland, Stefan from Romania. Sorry if I'm from... Polish guys are here also, right? And... welcome. So Building Smart has chapters in all European, I would say almost all European countries, and who is not in Building Smart yet is welcome. It's open. It's not OpenBIM, it's open society. It's open, a group of people who like to share the ideas and work on improving the OpenBIM towards the better construction, better built environment in general. That's our goal, and we were glad we could be part of this conference, and of course the presentations, as Libushe told me, and I need to thank to Libushe, Kameničková, and Pavla, who are our managers on the conference on behalf of Building Smart, who helped to pull it together, this session and the next session coming after the lunch. So thanks to them, presentations will be available. Contact me, myself or Libushe directly on behalf of Czech Building Smart, and thank you for the attention. Thank you. Enjoy the lunch and see you back on the last session.